Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY video. We're gonna head down to Athena in just a few minutes, but first I want to put in some time working on the gimbaled box for the galley. She is quite the beaut. The only thing I still need to figure out for this gimbaled box is the actual gimbal mount. Real quick, if you're new to my channel, the purpose of this gimbaled box here is to house an induction cooktop and an electric oven that I'm gonna use aboard my sailboat. For the gimbal mount, I've got two requirements. For one, I don't want the box to get any wider than it already is, and I also want the gimbal mount to work in the event that we get a knockdown or, God forbid, if the boat turns fully turtle. I've gone over a good handful of different designs for this gimbal mount with the Honorable Mr. Cement Boat guy, but I think we've finally found a winner. Let's get to some DIYing. We'll need a scrap piece of aluminum, two composite bearings, a set of nuts and bolts, and two little spacers. This is a rough sketch of what I'm going for. Let's get started. So far, so good. These two are the stationary part of the gimbal mount. It's this little part here on my drawing. These will get through bolted to the galley. Now there's just the small matter of the other half of the mount. The plan is to use a couple of these. Let's do a quick little test fit here. Not too shabby. The plan is to weld a nut to the inside of the gimbaled box, thread this through there into the receptacle doohickey. The one downside to this solution is I will have to remove the electric oven to be able to undo this in case I want to remove the gimbaled box, but that's not going to happen that often. As you just saw, the gimbaled box is now in fact gimbaled. He has a slight tilt of around 0.5 degrees. But we're so close, it's a few millimeters, so I don't think it matters. If it turns out to be an issue, I'll simply just add a little bit of weight here on the back of the box. There's only one thing left to do now, and that is to secure the electric oven. It's gonna get through bolted right through here. And there is also the small matter of some kind of pot retention device. Now a silicone mat on this might actually be enough to hold any pots or pans on there, but it would be nice to be able to physically lock things down. And just like that, the gimbaled box is done. Last minute, I decided to add this little support here in the back. Between that little support and the fact that the oven is now bolted to the box, I'm pretty sure this is gonna stay put. Both the oven and the induction cooktop are regular household appliances. You get way more bang for your buck going that route compared to something like the propane stove here. Sure, we will consume an ungodly amount of energy aboard Athena, but she will be completely propane free, which is nice from a safety standpoint, but also because you don't have to fiddle about with getting propane bottles refilled in foreign countries. I think the induction cooktop uses something like, yes, 6,000 watts if we really put the spurs to it, meaning if we use all 4 burners. And I think the oven is somewhere around 2,000 or 3,000 watts. This is a combination oven, meaning it's got both a convection mode and a microwave mode. We'll have a little bit of solar and a tow generator aboard Athena, but we'll also have this guy, the itty bitty Perkins, which is going to turn into a diesel generator. Almost identical to what you see over here, although this is, I believe, an 11 kilowatt version. Ours is going to be a little bit smaller. The generator coupled with a somewhat substantial battery bank and an inverter means, yes, we will be able to cook even when we're not connected to shore power. I think this setup is going to be pretty dang spiffy. With the gimbal box done, I can now haul this thing aboard Athena and start building the galley. And the sink for the head from last weekend's video is supposed to show up by the end of this week. Fingers crossed. Good morning, guys. It's been a hectic week. I chose to contract some kind of man flu, so I've been out sick most of the week, and now it's Saturday. Excluding my bout with death, there are some good news because, for one, the sink showed up, the head sink, and I also managed to get the box for the gimbal stove aboard the boat, although that did end up costing me a couple of these. The companionway is right and proper hooped, but that's okay. This is a relatively easy fix. Now, had the box been 3 or 4 millimeters bigger, it would not have fit through here. My backup plan was to lower it in through the forward hatch and then cut a gimbal box shaped hole in the main bulkhead, push it through there, and then glass that hole back up with a glassed butt joint. So that little bit of damage to the companionway is fine. Let's start today's DIY adventure with figuring out and framing the vanity in the head. As you can no doubt tell, this sink is designed to be undermounted. Even though undermounting a sink is going to be a little bit more work, I think it's going to be well worth it, because when I trim my luscious mane, stuff kind of goes everywhere, and it's going to be a lot easier to clean the area with an undermounted sink. The sink is going to go somewhere right around here. Now, I can build the frame for it today, but I'm going to hold off a little bit on adding the plywood to this little vanity, because there's going to be a lot of wiring and other stuff in here, and I don't want to make life any more difficult for myself than I have to. I want the sink somewhere right around here. I want a little locker or cabinet underneath the sink, and unlike a regular bathroom, this bathroom is going to be pounding into waves, so I also want the framing to help support the sink. This is basically going to be able to hold maybe not a full-size elephant, but at least a small one. This is going to turn into the bottom support for the sink, but I have to notch out a little corner because of the curvature back here. So the sink will go here. That looks pretty good. With the frame for the vanity done, I've put the head back in here just to see what everything looks like. And I think this is going to be pretty dang spiffy. It's kind of nice that the vanity is right here. Not to sound like an old man, but to get off of the head, it's kind of nice to be able to push off of the vanity. In a previous video, someone asked where we're going to keep the toilet paper. The plan is to make a little bit of an insert here that'll fit the size of a roll of toilet paper. That little insert is going to be in a big hatch that's going to be removable to get access to this area in here. That space is not going to be for storage. I'm planning on mounting the pump for the raw water for the head in there, and there's also going to be, like I said, a bunch of wiring in there, and there are going to be some plumbing connections in there that I want to make sure I can get to if I ever need to. Through the locker here and through the access hatch back here, I could do all of the plumbing and wiring and stuff. That would be pretty easy. What's really holding me back from finishing the vanity is the heater. It's going to go down here and it's going to blow hot air out onto your feet when you're standing in front of the mirror. I think that is going to be luxurious. But there are a couple of different options in play, and I want to figure out which heater I'm going to go with before I do anything else here. This is one of the heaters that's in play. It is, however, a little bit expensive. It is 2 kilowatt and it's around $400. That heater does the exact same thing as this guy, which I ordered direct from China. Sure, the lunchbox direct from China here has a somewhat shoddy build quality, but the thing that really turned me off of this was the noise. So this is the regular level of my voice. Now let's hook up the lunchbox. That is pretty freaking loud. I think this was around $30, including shipping from China. It is ridiculously loud. Of course, it is an option to switch out the fans for something that's a little bit more quiet, but then I don't know if it's going to output any kind of decent heat. There is another option, and that is to use essentially a radiator that you'd use for water cooling a PC, and then a more quiet fan than this, because there's room for a bigger fan. But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for what kind of heater I should go with, I would love to hear them. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. I better just make sure I mention that it needs to be a heater of this type, meaning something you can put hot water in through and it spits warm air out. There's still a little bit of daylight left today, so why don't we turn our attention to the galley and the gimbal box that's going to go right here. I fully expect this to be a little bit of a head scratcher. I've shoved the box up on a bucket. This is about 3 centimeters too high, but it still gives me a good idea of what this is going to look like. And it looks like I can push the stove out towards the hull a little bit further. The line down here, that is how far the original galley extended into the boat. Of course, this is a much, much bigger stove. As far as placing the stove, the most important thing is that there's enough room back here that the stove can in fact gimbal without hitting the hull. Also, I may have promised Ava a household size sink in the galley, which looking at this is gonna be a little bit of a squeeze, mainly because of this thing, because your head is gonna be kind of bumping against it to get to the far side of the sink. Yep, this is indeed turning out to be quite the head scratcher. Now, I could look at this thing from now until eternity and not get anywhere, so I think the best thing here is just to start drilling some holes and see how it fits. Whoops-a-daisy, the mic died there for a second. Now I'm hoping I can use this first mount to hold the oven in place while I kind of just line everything up. No doubt you can see the oven is very crooked right now, and it does need to come down about 1 degree. As a little bit of a sanity check, if I shine a laser through the first hole, it pretty much spot on lines up with where I want to drill the second hole. And I was super careful when I put up these bulkheads to make sure that they were absolutely parallel, so I think I'm ready to drill the last hole. If I mess up this hole, it's not the end of the world. I can always just fill the hole with thickened epoxy and try again. Clearly I should have built this about 1 centimeter wider. This is a very tight fit. Now, once I cut the hole for the screen, it's going to be plenty of access, but I don't have that hole right now. Okay, here goes nothing. Don't worry about the fact that this thing is tilting like crazy. That's just because the oven and the cooktop is not in there. Once that stuff is in there, it should level out. Until then, a couple of cans worth of paint will do the job. But there is a big issue here, and I'm not going to be able to use the 2 holes I've drilled because the gimbal box hits the inside of the hull. It looks like it happens somewhere right around 38 degrees, which is not horrible. But I am going to be adding insulation and a piece of plywood to the thickness of the hull, so that means it's going to hit sooner. So yeah, the gimbal box is going to have to come a little bit further in. And that was exactly why I didn't want to start building the galley until I had the gimbal box ready. Now, unfortunately, for the gimbal box to come a little bit further in, I'm gonna have to glass plywood to this, which I was planning on doing, but it's too cold tonight. Just to be clear, 38 degrees is quite a lot of heel, but when I add insulation back here, that 38 degrees goes down to 18 degrees. I believe 20 to 30 degrees is considered acceptable. Of course, more is better, but it would also be nice to be able to actually move around inside of the boat. In the spirit of compromise, I'm gonna bring the stove in about 5 centimeters. I don't want to spend any more space than that. If that's not enough, then I'm gonna compromise on the thickness of the insulation behind the stove. Even though I can't add this little bit of extra plywood tonight, I've still figured out exactly where to place the stove. Now, if I build the structure behind the stove I want to, it can gimbal to 23 degrees. If I build the absolute minimum I can get away with, it will gimbal to 33 degrees. I'm gonna spend the rest of tonight just mulling this situation over, but I will see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Good morning, guys. On the way here this morning, I swung by the workshop and picked up a couple of pieces of plywood for the galley. One for right here next to the stove, and then one for over here. It looks like it's going to be warm enough for me to glass these in place on Wednesday, but I can still go ahead and get these trimmed to size today. That way you guys can get a better idea of what the galley is going to look like. Here we have it, the first glimpse of what the new galley is going to look like. This piece of plywood up here is going to get trimmed back depending on how big of a sink we're going to put in. And of course there's going to be the kitchen island over here, which has plenty more work surface and also a ton of storage. I don't know how easy it is for you guys to get a sense of what this is going to be like without actually being here aboard the boat, but to me this looks very promising. There are of course some things that aren't represented in my little mock-up here. For one, there's going to be more storage underneath here, and I'm also going to take a chunk out of this to make room for your feet. Another cool thing about this little mock-up is that it can help Ava and I figure out the great sink debacle of 2020. Right now we're considering 2 different sizes of sink. This is the biggest one, and here's a 16-ounce paper cup just for comparison. The edges I've taped here represents the flange of the sink, so the exposed cardboard is the actual open part of the sink. Now I like this big size, but the thing is there also needs to be room for the faucet back here. This is the smaller size of sink in comparison. Small sink, big sink, 16 ounce or 50 centiliter paper cup. Now, I'm confident we'll figure out which one of these to go with, or maybe there's something else out there, but once I have the sink, I can then trim this to size. In next week's video, I hope I'll have the galley here all framed out and the plywood in place. I also hope I'll have figured out the heater situation in the head so I can finish the little vanity. And there's probably also going to be a little bit of a surprise in next week's video. On that little cliffhanger, I am going to end this week's video here. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!